Hi and welcome to Tabletop 24. I'm Alan.
I'm John.
I'm Brian.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Would Play Again. Today we have, as you can see in front of us, Paladins of the Western Kingdom from Garfield Games. Now, with this series, we look into the possibility of getting games back to the table and the speed of which we're going to get them to there, and how much effort is going to take it. In this busy world that we all live in, it's all about getting those games out and about as much as we can. So to start off with, we will talk about the learn time. So it was myself that learned this one. It took me about 30 minutes to 45 minutes with the expansion to go through everything. It's about a 34-page read. Now, Garfield do set out their rulebooks really well. They are quite concise in showing you what you're going to be picking up. So it's quite useful with a lot of examples in there as well. So it's a fairly easy read, but there is a lot going on in the game, and we'll obviously get to that in a bit. So it's quite a lengthy sort of learn. Now, moving on from that is the teach. Now, you'll see from in front of us, there's a lot of spaces, and we're going to pick that up in a bit. But the teach time with the expansion could go up to 40 minutes. Obviously, your learn time and your teach time is going to be different with everybody, and everybody does learn and teach differently. But for us, it was 20 minutes to get going with the base game. Now, we did do one with the expansion, which was a refresh, and took us about an extra sort of 10 minutes on top to cover the new areas, because they are a little bit different and they are a little bit more complex. But it's quite a lot to get out before you start playing. And you do really need to know what you're doing before you get going. Whereas some games you can kind of just go with it. But to start with, you do really need to know what you're doing.
Yeah, the setup equally took quite a long time, much more than you might expect for typical games. So up to maybe 20 minutes. There's a lot to put out here, lots of different kind of cards. You've got to find the right cards, place in the right order. The board's quite big, takes up quite a lot of table space as well. And then you've got individual player boards as well. So you set up the board in the middle, then you'd have to pay, each player set up their own player board. So once you've done all that, you're looking at maybe 20 minutes to sort of get the board out of the box onto the table in the form that you can see here, ready to start playing.
Yeah. And we have only got this set up as a two-player game. So there is a solo mode, which does involve two boards, but this is pretty much 2/3 of the game. There'll be another two player boards on the other side of the table, so it does take up a lot of table space.
It's a big table game for sure, and you need space around your own boards here to place cards that you gather here and down here, so it'd be quite cramped unless you've got a this is a 4 foot by 4 foot table. It just about fits on here.
So once you're finished, here's obviously the teardown. So there's lots of components. Most of it is going to fit in and about the same sort of places. You're not really mixing things in. So teardown is relatively simple, but there's a lot to tear down. Now the collector's box does obviously help with that. There's a nice insert in there, so everything has its place. But you're looking at probably about a 10-minute teardown. And one of the things we will be looking at going forward is the speed of which we can get a game back to the table. Now, would you play it again straight away? You're probably looking at a couple of minutes to reset everything. Now, again, because things are not getting shuffled in, you're not taking the mercenaries you'll pick up and working through and shuffling them through and with other cards. So everything does go back in its right place. Shuffle up the different decks that you can see around. So you've got the village deck, the mercenary deck, corruption, the village tavern, and some of the muster cards. You'll be shuffling them up, bring all your players back to the pool, and because you don't have a set number of workers, they just go in a central pool. So you're quite fortunate there that it's fairly easy to reset, but you're still looking at a good few minutes to get that reset and set up again. One of the things obviously is that, and I think will lead into the length of it, is a long game, so you might not even get it too quickly back to it. So I think, John, on you for how long it is, really.
Well, yeah, so I think our total play time was about 2.5 hours per game. So yeah, it's fairly lengthy, fairly heavy, fairly thinky game. I would say I myself consider this lighter than Terraforming Mars. I know other people don't, but it is at the heavier end of the scale in terms of games. But that said, there's not that. I wouldn't bring this out for first-time players or people who are new to the hobby at all. I think it might deter people or even frighten them.
I think it's because there's so much to do. You've got a choice of recruiting villagers, or just using villagers, which is different. The same thing for the warriors. You can either recruit them with conversion, if you like, they call it convert, isn't it? Or you can just use some of their abilities. You've got kings challenges to develop. You've got your board to develop, and so there's lots of different things that you keep your head around. And I, for example, found it difficult to sort of see all the way over the far side of the board to see what special abilities you can get from these things. So that's why it takes a little bit of spatial thinking as well to understand how best to use your actions. So it's quite a heavy game in that sense.
Yeah, one of the good things that goes for this, though, and across all of Shem games, is that iconography is the same throughout all of his games. If you look at Raiders or Settlers or any, it's all the same.
Yeah, both the trilogies.
Yeah, they carry across, so that does speed things up and makes things a bit easier across that.
Yeah,
and also the art style, as always, is outstanding.
Yeah, it's great artwork. But
it's a good looking game.
Yeah. There's just there's a lot on there. So one of the main things that makes this unique is the Paladin Mechanic. Now, at the start of your round, if you're playing the base game, you'll take 3 of your Paladins. If you're playing the expansion, you'll take 4. Now, you will look at those. Each of those will have an attribute bonus and some workers and a special effect for the round. And what you will then be doing with those is you will be picking one to play this round. You'll be putting one on top of your deck. You'll be putting one on the bottom of your deck, so you may see it later in the game. And if you have drawn 4 because you're playing in the expansion, you would remove that from the game, so you will not be coming back to that. Now, in a typical game, you will get through most of your deck. You will see them coming through. So you can sort of plan ahead for a round. Now, the game is only 7 rounds, and it plays to the end of the 7th round. So you are working through these, picking up, trying to plan. You may try and stack the Paladins together as you go through. So you can get a bit lucky with the draw in the sense that you can see ones that are going to have some synergy, but you can also manufacture something that's going to improve your ability. That is a really nice mechanic. I think it's fairly unique to Paladins. I've certainly not seen it used many other places or any at all, to be fair. So I think that's great, and obviously it's the hinge of the whole gameplay. Now, like we said before, you're going to be taking workers from the general supply based on your Paladin and the tavern card, and you're going to be using those on your board to grow the engine, if you will. And I think that there is a lot of avenues that you can go through, which does mean that your sort of decision time is quite lengthy. Now, I like the decisions. You can follow certain strategies. It's very points salad type of game. You can follow and go, right, okay, this game I'm going to really focus on building up my attack power, and we're using Fortify and Convert, for instance, and then obviously using Garrison and Attack to then boost up other areas of the game.
To go along with that, though, you can't just focus on one area like that, because they are dependent upon other things you've got to develop as well, with your score trackers and your influence. So you've got to have a bit of a variety of things you're doing. Which again can sort of lead you to think, like, oh, I want to do this, but I can't do that because I've got to get influence in this area first. So it does add to, well, what's the best way of getting to where I want to be with what I need to do to get there? Yeah. And that's part of the decision process, I think.
Yeah, if you have AP prone players, they will be prone to AP when playing this.
Yeah, there's a lot of decisions. There's a lot of different bits you can do, and because there are so many different places you can go. And with things like the Vassal expansion, where if there's any work, or you can pick up a criminal that will be wild, because it does give you corruption, but you've got or suspicion cards, to be fair, and you've got the being wild. You can sort of manufacture what you need. So you might not draw the tavern card you want. You might not have synergy with your Paladin, but you've got so many options that actually you can sometimes, the rounds between players are not overly long in most parts. But you can be sitting there for a couple of minutes when it is your turn, going, well, what are my options? And you really need to maximise those options to get a good score and sort of be competitive in it. So if you've got somebody that is AP prone that wants to think through all of the options and work out all the different avenues, I think they could struggle.
One of the cons for me is there's not a lot of player interaction with this game. No. So you're basically looking at your board, You're building your board up. There's a little bit of blocking other players, maybe, or picking villagers before they can get theirs. But fundamentally, you're just playing your board to get as many points as you can. And I think, other games, there's a lot more interaction with the players and looking at each other. This doesn't have that so much, really.
No, I think it's one of the few worker placement games where you're not really competing for spaces.
No.
You'll complete it on these tracks, and you can compete on the new expansion for the muster track. But the only other place you're going to be competing is placing out your garrisons or your
Diplomats.
Essentially, I think these are clerics, aren't they? So you would place them out on the board depending upon where you get. So, and you can also find yourself really narrowed into that. So Brian mentioned earlier about getting up the track. So if you, for instance, haven't got much in the way of faith, then you're limited to where you can place your clerics, and so you may have been blocked out by other players. So you need to be boosting that up to then be able to give you more options as long as you go into the wider world. So yeah, you do have to focus on a lot of different areas, and not to steal Brian's thunder because he's going to pick up on the expansion a bit, but in the game that we played with the expansion, I really focused on these new abilities that you've got, which are great, but it really severely limited me on other items.
So about the expansion, essentially what the expansion is a little bit more board down there at the end, some more cards, some more allies you can pick up, and some more options for that. Essentially, it just adds a few more options to get more points, to build up your decks, really. I think it, for me, didn't really add much to the game. I think don't think it changed the game fundamentally, particularly. If anything, it made it more difficult to decide where to focus. And when I played it with the expansion, I just pretty much ignored it. I tried it a couple of things, but I didn't really focus much on it at all, and it didn't change the game for me.
Yeah, it's an odd type of expansion. It's more of the same in the sense that it's more worker placement, more collecting of different cards, and more options to
Just
get
more.
Just more.
I felt it diluted all the rest of the stuff you've got to do, though. Like getting the track here.
It wasn't in addition, was it? It was on either or. You kind of had to go, am I going to... Because, again, with the abilities across all of the work placements on the right-hand side of your board, you need something in order to get something. So you need diplomacy in order to activate things on the negotiate space. But you will get diplomacy from mustering. And you kind of hemmed in that in order to do well with the diplomacy, you've got to have done other things beforehand. So it kind of gives you that sort of barrier. And I think I was quite hampered just focusing on that, which maybe on another play, I'd do a little bit more of everything. But then, like Brian says, does that then dilute where you're going? Because you get points based on how far up the attribute tracks you get with your 4 different attributes. Now, the bigger points values are at the end of that track, and it can be quite hard to get up there if you're diluting that amongst others. And it's not like so for instance, if you get your attribute to 6, you get 6 points. If you get it to 10, you get 13. So it's not balanced, that it's an even split, and you've even then got to get it to 8 before you get a point increase. So if you've got everything around the 6 or the 7 mark, which you may end up with, you're not getting as many points from it as if you focused on one area. But you do get hampered by focusing on that one area.
Yeah, I will admit I've not played it with the expansion, so I can't comment on it. But for me, I thought the plays that I've had, it was a round too long. There are games out there that we played and all of us have gone, I thought I had another round. And you do find yourself wanting another round to just complete more. But I found I'd gone up to the top of the track and I'd got everything out. And the last round I was like, how do I maximise my points? And I just thought it was maybe one round too long. Whereas some of the other games in this that have been produced by Shem, they're too short.
Yeah.
So and maybe the expansion was put in to try and maybe make that a little bit different for me if I play through with that. But yeah, I do think it's just a round too long.
Yeah. So a lot going on. There's a lot of worker placements. It is sort of that medium to heavyweight game. And like I say, there's a lot of choices in there. So as always, we round this out with our view on whether we would get this back to the table and how quick it would get back to the table. So, John,
would play again.
Yeah, so it sits
Yeah.
probably in that middle bit.
Yeah, would play again. If somebody pulled this off a shelf and say fancy a game of this, I wouldn't hesitate. It's a good game. It's my favourite one of the companies. And yeah, I would sit through it. It's good.
Brian?
I played again. I think because there's so much going on. If it's been a long time since you've played it, you got to almost relearn it again. So it all sits in, play it again, sort of straight away, just to play it once to learn it again, and then play it again to play it again, if you like. But because it's such a big game, I felt there's other games I'd rather just play. So you'd have to have time to do it. You have to be in the mood to do it. It's in my mind. And if, there's a load of other type of games, shame games, which are much easier to get into and much readily play. So I play it again, but I wouldn't necessarily want to play it very often.
Yeah, so and finally for me, it is also a woodplay game. So we're actually all agreed on this one. It's a very nice game. I think there's a lot of decisions in it which I really like. There's a lot of things going on, but I think the sheer size of it, the teach time, if I was getting it out to new people, there's other games. If I was bringing more newer players to it, I'd definitely go for one of potentially the North Sea, if not Architects of the Western Kingdom. So I would go for others first. But if people like the Garfield games and like the stuff from Shamsam, I would then say play Paladins. I think it's got enough weight to it that will keep you coming back for more. And I think there's a lot in the box. So I think variability, and you will get that. I mean, we've never played with all of the villagers in the times that we've played it. So I think for us, we'd play it again. We'd probably put it in that rotation. It might just be something, do you know what? I fancy playing Paladins. But I don't think any of us are going to go looking to get it straight back off the shelf. I think there's other games that will probably come to it beforehand.
Yeah.
With the Shem games, there's a comfortable familiarity between all of the gameplay and style that flows across all of the games. Yeah. And I think this has that. If you played the other games, you could pick this up not too much trouble, but it is the heaviest of them all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So with that, thank you for watching along for this episode of We'll Play Again. If you haven't done so already, please give us a like, a subscribe, or comment down below, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, stop it.
Well, tape.
Stop it.
Well,